That morning began like every morning in the 45 years Grace would had shared with Harold, peaceful, predictable, wrapped in the kind of silence that only coastal living and long marriages know. The scent of French roast drifted through the sunlit kitchen where family photographs lined every wall like a gallery of everything she'd built. The grandfather clock, a wedding gift from Harold's mother, ticked its steady rhythm, measuring out the hours of her life in patient, reliable beats. Outside the glass doors, the Pacific rolled and whispered against the cliffs below their Carmel home. Grace moved across the cool hardwood floor in her slippers, careful not to disturb Harold in his study. After 45 years, she knew his rhythms as well as her own, the morning paper, the strong coffee, the pretense of reading while his mind wandered elsewhere. But that morning, something in his rhythm felt wrong. If you're watching this video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Now let's get to the story. The faint tap-tap-tap of his foot against the hardwood, a nervous tick she'd noticed only in moments of concealment. When his grandson asked about the missing Christmas cookies. When their daughter questioned the dent in the car. When Grace herself had once asked about the late nights at the office, years ago, forgiven and forgotten. Or so she thought. Grace paused in the kitchen doorway, her hand tightening around her coffee mug. Through the half-open study door, she could see Harold's silver hair catching the morning light, reading glasses perched on his nose. The picture of dignified aging. The man she'd trusted with her entire adult life. When his phone buzzed on the desk, his hand moved too quickly. Not the casual reach of someone checking the time. This was urgent. Hungry. His whole body shifted toward the device like a plant bending toward sunlight. Then, as if sensing her presence, he glanced up. Their eyes met for just a second before he smiled, that same warm smile she'd trusted for 45 years. "Morning, darling," he said easily. "Sleep well?" "Like always," Grace replied, her voice steady as stone. He returned to his tablet and she returned to the kitchen, but something had shifted in the air between them. A crack in the foundation neither of them acknowledged. 20 minutes later, Harold announced he needed to shower. He left his phone on the desk. Face up this time, a mistake he'd never made before. Grace didn't plan to look. She'd never been the kind of wife who snooped, who questioned, who doubted. She'd raised their children to trust until given reason not to. She'd taught her grandchildren that love meant giving people the benefit of the doubt. But when she passed the study on her way to water the ferns, the phone screen lit up on its own. A message notification. From someone named Lydia Moore. Grace stopped walking. The watering can felt suddenly heavy in her hand. The message preview was brief, casual, devastating, counting the hours till we can finally have the villa to ourselves. The one with the ocean view. Can't wait to see you there, handsome. Time didn't stop, that's a cliché people use when they don't know how to describe the feeling. Time stretched. It became elastic, distorted. Grace stared at those words, reading them once, twice, 3 times, searching desperately for an alternate meaning. The villa. Her villa. The property she'd purchased with her retirement savings on their 30th anniversary. The cliffside retreat in Monterey she'd imagined filling with grandchildren's laughter, with family Christmas mornings, with the quiet dignity of growing old together. Ocean view. Can't wait to see you there. Every word was a nail driven into the coffin of everything she'd believed about her life. Through the bathroom door, she could hear the shower running. Harold was humming, some old tune he always sang when he was happy. The sound of falling water mixed with his cheerful voice felt obscene. Mocking. He was in there, scrubbing away evidence, planning his betrayal, completely unaware that his entire world had just shifted beneath him. Grace set down the watering can with a hand that didn't shake. That was the strangest part. Her hand was steady. Her breathing was calm. The tears she expected never came. Instead, there was only a cold, vast emptiness spreading through her chest, not pain exactly, but the absence of everything she'd felt before this moment. It wasn't shock. Shock would have been a mercy. This was recognition. The final piece of a puzzle she'd been trying to ignore for months, maybe years, clicking into place with horrible, perfect clarity. The late-night work calls he took in the garage. The weekend consulting trips to San Francisco that he never wanted her to join. The way he'd started password protecting his laptop, just work security protocols, darling, you understand. The distance in his eyes when he looked at her now, as if she were part of the furniture. A comfortable chair. A familiar painting he'd stopped noticing. Her daughter had asked her last month, casually, if everything was all right. You and Dad seem distant lately, she'd said over coffee. Grace had laughed it off. 45 years of marriage, sweetheart. Sometimes you just need space. What a fool she'd been. Grace picked up the phone. She didn't need his password, she'd watched him unlock it 1,000 times. The pattern was muscle memory, down, right, up, diagonal. The anniversary of his mother's death, traced in invisible lines. The screen opened easily. She navigated to his messages like someone walking through a house they used to know by heart. Her fingers moved automatically, detached from the screaming in her mind. She found Lydia's conversation thread and scrolled upward, watching weeks of betrayal unspool before her eyes. Can't stop thinking about last weekend. You make me feel young again, Harold. Really young. I bought something special to wear for you. Wine red lace. Your favorite. And then, Harold's responses. Each one a small death. Grace doesn't understand me anymore. She's so focused on the grandchildren, on her garden club, on everything except us. You're what I need, Lydia. What I deserve. The villa is perfect. She'll never know. She never comes up to Monterey without planning weeks in advance. The bathroom door opened. Grace's thumb moved faster, screenshotting, forwarding messages to her own phone, erasing the evidence of her digital trespass. By the time Harold emerged in his bathrobe, toweling his silver hair, his phone was back on the desk, exactly where he'd left it. Grace was in the kitchen, calmly slicing strawberries for his oatmeal. You're up early, Harold said, kissing her cheek. His skin smelled like expensive soap and lies. Couldn't sleep, Grace replied. Her voice sounded normal. Even. Too much coffee yesterday. He poured himself a cup, leaned against the counter. Listen, I've got a work thing this weekend. Real estate development conference in Monterey. Probably won't be back until Sunday evening. Will you be all right? Monterey. Grace's knife paused for just a fraction of a second against the cutting board. Then continued its steady rhythm. Of course, she said, arranging strawberries in a perfect circle. I'll visit Sarah and the grandkids. They've been asking me to babysit. Harold smiled, relieved. You're amazing, Grace. I don't deserve you. For the first time in 45 years, they agreed on something. No, Grace said softly, handing him his oatmeal. You really don't. He didn't hear the edge in her voice. He never did. That night, Grace sat in her reading chair by the window, watching Harold sleep. The ocean crashed against the cliffs below, steady and relentless. In her lap was her tablet, open to a search, Lydia Moore, artist, California. The results populated quickly. Watercolor artist. Gallery showings in San Francisco. Mid-30s, blonde, vibrant. And married. Married to Benjamin Moore, a prominent criminal defense attorney. Grace stared at the wedding photo on Benjamin's law firm website. A handsome couple. Power and beauty. The kind of people who took what they wanted without asking permission. But they'd made a mistake. They'd taken something that belonged to Grace Wood. And Grace, the retired school principal who'd spent 40 years teaching children about consequences, about actions and reactions, about the laws of cause and effect, was about to teach them the most important lesson of their lives. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she'd found 20 minutes earlier. It rang twice before a man's voice answered, sleep rough and confused. Benjamin Moore speaking. Mr. Moore, Grace said, her voice steady as the tide. My name is Grace Wood. I believe our spouses are planning a weekend together in Monterey. I think you and I should talk. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, what do you want from me, Mrs. Wood? Grace watched Harold's sleeping form through the bedroom doorway. Watched his chest rise and fall, oblivious and peaceful. An audience, she replied quietly. And maybe justice. By the end of that phone call, justice had found its accomplice. Grace hadn't slept in 3 days. Not really. She'd mastered the art of lying still beside Harold, breathing evenly, performing rest while her mind catalogued evidence like she used to organize lesson plans. Methodical. Thorough. Unforgiving. On the 4th morning, she sat at her kitchen table surrounded by printouts. Screenshots of text messages. Calendar entries Harold thought he'd deleted. Credit card statements showing dinners for 2 at restaurants Grace had never visited. A paper trail of betrayal so obvious she wondered how she'd missed it, or if she'd simply chosen not to see. Her reading glasses sat crooked on her nose. Her silver hair, usually perfectly styled, hung loose around her shoulders. In the reflection of her coffee cup, she barely recognized herself. This wasn't the Grace Wood who'd spent 45 years as Harold's wife. This wasn't the school principal who'd taught 3 generations of children about integrity and second chances. This was someone harder. Someone who understood that forgiveness was a luxury she could no longer afford. Because this wasn't just about her anymore. Her granddaughter Emma had asked her last week, eyes bright with 10-year-old innocence, "Grandma, when I grow up, will I have a marriage like yours and Grandpa's?" Grace had hugged her tight, smelling strawberry shampoo and trust, and promised, "Even better, sweetheart. Even better." That promise now felt like broken glass in her throat. Grace picked up her phone and opened the photo album labeled Family. Generations of Woods stared back at her. Her children's weddings. Christmases around the fireplace. The beach house gatherings where Harold played the perfect patriarch, bouncing grandchildren on his knee while Grace served homemade lemonade. What would they inherit now? Not just his money or property, but his legacy. His choices. His shame. Her grandson Tyler was applying to colleges. Would he one day Google his grandfather's name and find scandal instead of success? Would Emma learn that love was just a performance, that vows meant nothing when something younger and shinier came along? Grace closed the album. Her jaw set with the same determination she'd used when fighting the school board for better funding, when demanding accountability from parents who'd failed their children. She would not let Harold's weakness destroy what 3 generations had built. But first, she needed to understand the enemy. Grace opened her laptop and typed, "Lydia Moore Artist California." The search results bloomed across her screen like poisonous flowers. Lydia's website was professionally designed, watercolor landscapes, abstract pieces that probably sold for thousands to people with more money than taste. Her bio described her as a passionate explorer of light and emotion, which Grace translated as pretentious and self-absorbed. The photographs showed a woman in her mid-30s. Blonde. Yoga-toned. The kind of carefully curated beauty that required expensive maintenance and constant validation. In every photo, Lydia tilted her head just so, smiled with practiced spontaneity, positioned herself like she was always being watched. Grace studied those images with clinical detachment. This was Harold's great love? This Instagram filter of a human being? Then she clicked on About Me and everything shifted. Art saved me during the darkest period of my marriage, Lydia's bio read. My husband's demanding career left me feeling invisible, forgotten. Through watercolor, I found my voice again. I paint for every woman who's ever felt like she disappeared into someone else's shadow. Grace's coffee went cold in her hand. Lydia was married. She navigated to the photograph section, scrolling past landscapes until she found a gallery opening photo. Lydia in a black dress, radiant, tucked under the arm of a tall man in an expensive suit. The caption read, "Couldn't have tonight's success without my biggest supporter, Benjamin." Grace clicked on the tagged name. Benjamin Moore's LinkedIn profile loaded immediately. Criminal defense attorney. Partner at Moore and Associates. Harvard Law. Defended high-profile cases. The kind of lawyer who could make guilty people look innocent and destroy honest people's reputations before breakfast. In his profile photo, Benjamin Moore smiled with the confidence of someone who'd never lost anything he couldn't replace. Handsome in that distinguished way men age into when they have money and power. Salt and pepper hair. Strong jaw. Eyes that probably charmed juries and intimidated opposing counsel. Grace stared at that photograph and felt something cold settle in her chest. Harold wasn't a midlife crisis. He was a project. She picked up her phone and dialed the number she'd saved 3 days ago. Benjamin answered on the second ring. Mrs. Wood. I was hoping you'd call back. His voice was smooth. Practiced. The voice of someone who negotiated for a living. Mr. Moore, Grace said carefully. I think we should meet. I agree. Are you free this afternoon? There's a cafe in Carmel, Lucia's, on Ocean Avenue. Quiet. Private. Grace knew Lucia's. She and Harold used to have breakfast there on Sundays, back when breakfast meant something other than performance. 2 o'clock, she said. I'll be there. Lucia's hadn't changed in 20 years. The same wrought iron chairs, the same hand-painted tiles, the same smell of espresso and baked goods that used to mean comfort. Now it just meant before and after. Grace arrived 15 minutes early, claiming a corner table where she could watch the entrance. She ordered mint tea she wouldn't drink and arranged her purse, her phone, her composure like armor. Benjamin Moore walked in at exactly 2 o'clock. He was taller than his photograph suggested. Moved with the kind of confidence that came from winning. His suit probably cost more than Grace's first car. When he spotted her, his expression arranged itself into practiced sympathy. Mrs. Wood. He extended his hand. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Grace shook it briefly. His grip was firm, calculated. Mr. Moore. He sat across from her, ordered black coffee, waited until the server left before speaking. I want you to know how sorry I am. What our spouses are doing, it's unconscionable. Grace studied him over her reading glasses. 40 years of teaching had made her an expert in detecting lies. Benjamin's sorrow was flawless. Too flawless. How long have you known? She asked. About 3 months. He shook his head, the picture of wounded dignity. I found hotel receipts. Confronted Lydia. She broke down, said it was just a moment of weakness, that she'd end it. But she didn't. No. His jaw tightened convincingly. She didn't. Grace folded her hands on the table. Your wife's website says she felt invisible in your marriage. That your demanding career left her feeling forgotten. Something flickered behind Benjamin's eyes. Pride, maybe. Or amusement. Lydia has always had a flair for the dramatic, he said smoothly. The truth is, I've given her everything. Financial security. Social standing. Freedom to pursue her art without worrying about money. Some people mistake generosity for neglect. The server brought his coffee. Benjamin added cream with steady hands. Grace watched him perform concern, perform hurt, perform partnership. She recognized the choreography because she'd been dancing the same routine with Harold for 45 years. What do you want from this meeting, Mr. Moore? He leaned forward. The same thing you do, I imagine. To protect what's ours. Your husband and my wife have shown us who they really are. Now we decide how to respond. And how do you suggest we respond? Benjamin's smile was slight. Professional. I'm a defense attorney, Mrs. Wood. I've spent my career protecting people's reputations, their assets, their futures. Divorce is messy. Public. Expensive. It destroys families, ruins legacies, turns private pain into public spectacle. Grace felt her pulse quicken. What's your alternative? We remind them what they have to lose. He pulled out his phone, scrolled through something, then turned the screen toward her. I have documentation. Every hotel. Every lie. Every moment of their little romance. In California, infidelity doesn't affect asset division, but it certainly affects public opinion. Harold's a retired financial advisor, isn't he? How would his former clients feel knowing he lacks basic integrity? Grace stared at the evidence on his screen. Photographs. Timestamps. The kind of ammunition that could destroy a reputation in hours. You've been collecting this for 3 months, she said slowly. I believe in being prepared. You believe in control. Benjamin's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted. A chess player recognizing a worthy opponent. I believe, he said carefully, in protecting what's mine. My marriage. My reputation. My wife's career. Sometimes protection requires strategy. Grace looked at this man across from her, this charming destroyer in an expensive suit, and saw Harold's reflection. Saw every manipulator who'd ever smiled while sharpening knives. Saw the men who took what they wanted and called it love, who broke trust and called it passion, who destroyed families and called it destiny. You want to blackmail them, she said. I want to remind them of consequences. Benjamin sat back, coffee cup balanced perfectly in his hand. Harold stands to lose his grandchildren's respect. His children's trust. The comfortable retirement you've built together. Lydia stands to lose her gallery connections, her artistic reputation, the financial security I provide. Fear is often more effective than divorce lawyers. Grace's granddaughter's voice echoed in her memory. Grandma, you always say everyone deserves a second chance. She looked at Benjamin more and thought, not everyone. I need time to think, Grace said. Of course. Benjamin placed a business card on the table. Call me when you're ready. But Mrs. Wood, don't wait too long. They're planning another weekend at your villa. This Friday. Grace's hand tightened on her teacup. How do you know? Because I've been listening to my wife's phone calls for 3 months. He stood, buttoned his jacket. Knowledge is power, Mrs. Wood. And right now, we have all the knowledge. He left cash on the table for his coffee and walked out. Grace sat alone in Lucia's, surrounded by the ghosts of Sunday mornings with Harold, staring at Benjamin Moore's business card. She thought about Emma asking about marriage. About Tyler applying to colleges under the Wood family name. About the legacy she'd spent 45 years building with a man who'd thrown it away for watercolor landscapes and wine-red lace. Grace picked up the business card. Then she picked up her phone. Grace returned home to find Harold packing for his conference. She stood in the bedroom doorway, watching him fold dress shirts with the careful precision he'd always used for important trips. The good cologne sat on the dresser. The Italian leather overnight bag, a gift from their children last Christmas, lay open on the bed like a wound. Need any help? She asked. Harold looked up, smiled. No, darling. Just the usual boring work clothes. Boring work clothes. Grace's eyes tracked to the cashmere sweater he was folding, the one she'd bought him for their anniversary. The one he'd said was too nice for everyday wear. Will you call when you get there? She asked. So I know you arrived safely? Of course. He crossed to her, kissed her forehead. You're sweet to worry. Sweet. 45 years reduced to that one patronizing word. Grace went downstairs and made dinner. Roasted chicken with rosemary, the way Harold liked it. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind married people mistake for contentment. He complimented the potatoes. She asked about his conference agenda. They performed marriage like actors who'd forgotten they were acting. After he went to bed, Grace sat at the kitchen table with Benjamin Moore's business card. She thought about the villa. Her villa, the cliffside retreat she'd purchased with money inherited from her own mother. Not Harold's mother's estate, as he'd told Lydia. Her mother, who'd worked 3 jobs to send Grace to college, who'd taught her that women built their own foundations because men's promises were written in sand. Grace had built that villa as a legacy. A place where her grandchildren would learn to love the ocean, where family traditions would root themselves in something permanent and pure. Harold was using it as a hotel for his betrayal. She picked up her phone. Benjamin answered immediately. Mrs. Wood. The villa, Grace said. That's where we do this. Silence. Then, tell me about it. It's in Monterey. Ocean view. 3 bedrooms. Completely private. Harold told Lydia it belonged to his mother's estate, but it's mine. My inheritance. My name on the deed. Perfect. She could hear Benjamin's smile through the phone. Poetic, even. They violate your sanctuary, we consecrate it with truth. The word, consecrate, felt wrong in his mouth. Too religious for what they were planning. They'll be there Friday evening, Grace continued. Harold said he wouldn't return until Sunday. Then we have 2 days to prepare. Benjamin's voice shifted to businesslike efficiency. I'll bring cameras. Small ones, easily hidden. We'll need documentation, proof for when this becomes complicated. Complicated how? Insurance, Mrs. Wood. Against future claims. Against accusations. Against our spouse's inevitable attempts to rewrite history. Grace thought about the screenshots on her phone. The evidence she'd already collected. Benjamin was right, Harold would deny everything if given the chance. Men like him always did. Friday morning, Benjamin said. I'll meet you there. We'll set the stage before they arrive. Grace didn't sleep that night either. Instead, she lay beside Harold and remembered. She remembered their son Michael's 8th birthday party at the villa. Harold had taught him to fish off the dock, patient and gentle, the kind of father who made other dads jealous. Michael had caught his first sea bass and Harold had photographed the moment, framed it, hung it in the villa's living room with the caption, "The Wood family legacy continues." She remembered their daughter Sarah's wedding shower there. 15 women drinking champagne on the deck while the ocean crashed below, laughing about marriage and babies and futures that seemed certain. Harold had played bartender, charming Sarah's friends, making Grace feel proud to be his wife. She remembered last summer when 5-year-old Emma had run screaming through the villa's halls, playing hide-and-seek with her cousins. Harold had been, dramatically searching behind curtains while the children giggled. Afterward, Emma had climbed into Grace's lap and whispered, "Grandma, I want to live here forever." Grace had kissed her hair and thought, this is what I built. This is what matters. Now Harold had turned her sanctuary into his adultery suite. Beside her, he shifted in his sleep, murmuring something unintelligible. Grace watched the rise and fall of his chest and felt nothing. No love. No hate. Just the cold mathematical certainty that some betrayals couldn't be forgiven, only answered. Friday morning arrived dressed in fog. Grace told Harold she was visiting Sarah. He kissed her goodbye, reminded her where he'd left his conference hotel number, just in case, performed concern so well she almost believed him. 20 minutes after he left, Grace packed her car with supplies. Candles. Wine glasses. The love letters she'd forged in Harold's handwriting, decades of watching him write grocery lists had made the forgery easy. She'd written things he might say to Lydia, romantic garbage about finally feeling alive, and you make me believe in second chances. The drive to Monterey took 2 hours. Grace knew every curve of Highway 1, had driven it hundreds of times for family weekends and quiet retreats. But today the ocean looked different. Darker. The cliffs seemed to lean inward like they were conspiring. Benjamin's black Mercedes was already parked when she arrived. He stood on the villa's deck, hands in his pockets, staring at the water. He dressed casually, jeans, sweater, the kind of expensive casual that announced wealth without advertising it. Mrs. Wood. He turned as she approached. Your villa is stunning. Thank you. Grace unlocked the door, felt the familiar rush of sea air and memories. Everything looked exactly as she'd left it. Family photographs on the mantel. Emma's drawing of a mermaid still taped to the refrigerator. The jigsaw puzzle her grandchildren had started last Christmas, still half finished on the coffee table. Benjamin walked through the rooms like an appraiser. They chose well. This place feels sacred. Family sacred. It was, Grace said quietly. You built this house for family, Benjamin said, running his hand along the kitchen counter. Now you'll watch what kind of family it truly held. Something in his tone made Grace's skin prickle. Not sympathy. Something colder. She turned to find him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Where should we start? She asked. Benjamin pulled a small black bag from his jacket. Cameras first. Bedroom, obviously. Living room. Anywhere they might congregate. The clinical way he said congregate felt obscene. For the next hour, they worked in efficient silence. Benjamin installed tiny cameras, so small Grace wouldn't have noticed them if she wasn't watching him place them. Behind picture frames. Inside smoke detectors. Angles that would capture everything. Grace arranged the bedroom. She placed her forged love letters on Harold's pillow, artfully scattered like he'd been reading them before bed. Lit candles on the nightstand. Set out the expensive wine Harold claimed to save for special occasions. Every detail carefully staged to look like romantic preparation. She was smoothing the bedspread when a photograph on the dresser caught her eye. Harold and her, 20 years ago, standing on this same deck. His arm around her waist. Both of them laughing at something their son had said. They looked happy. They looked real. Second thoughts? Benjamin asked from the doorway. Grace set down the photograph face down. No. Good. He checked his watch. They'll be here in 3 hours. We should position ourselves. Position ourselves? We're not leaving, Mrs. Wood. We're going to watch. Grace's stomach turned. Watch? You wanted justice. Benjamin's eyes were flat. Empty. Justice requires witnesses. We'll wait in the upstairs guest room. Watch the cameras. Document everything. When the moment is right, when they're thoroughly entangled in their lies, we'll make our presence known. That's. Grace searched for the word. Cruel. It's necessary. Benjamin moved closer. You asked me to help you. This is how it works. Half measures accomplish nothing. Your husband needs to see himself through your eyes. My wife needs to understand consequences. Grace thought about Emma asking if she'd have a marriage like her grandparents. Thought about Tyler applying to colleges under a family name Harold was desecrating. Thought about 45 years of trust traded for wine-red lace and watercolor landscapes. All right, she whispered. Benjamin smiled. I'll order food. We could be waiting several hours. While he called a delivery service, Grace walked through the villa one more time. Touched the kitchen counter where she'd taught her daughter to make pie crust. Stood in the living room where Harold had read bedtime stories to their grandchildren. Stepped onto the deck where Emma had said she wanted to live forever. Every room felt haunted now. Not by ghosts, by what should have been. By the family mythology Grace had spent decades constructing, brick by brick, memory by memory. Harold was going to burn it all down for a woman who painted feelings she didn't have. And Grace, grandmother, teacher, keeper of family honor, was going to make him watch it burn. She heard a car on the gravel driveway. They're early, Benjamin called from upstairs. Grace's heart hammered against her ribs. Through the window, she saw Harold's car. Saw him step out, stretch, then walk around to open the passenger door. Lydia emerged in a white sundress. Young. Radiant. Laughing at something Harold said. They looked happy. They looked like they belonged here. Grace felt something crack inside her chest, not her heart breaking, but something harder. Something that had been holding her together for 45 years finally giving way. Mrs. Wood, Benjamin whispered from the stairs. It's time. Grace took one last look at the photograph of her family on the mantel, 3 generations of Woods smiling in front of the villa, before Harold made it a crime scene. Then she followed Benjamin upstairs. The cameras activated with silent efficiency. On the laptop screen, Grace watched her husband unlock her villa with the spare key he'd claimed to have lost. Watched him pull Lydia inside. Watched them kiss in the doorway like teenagers. Watched her entire life become evidence. Benjamin's hand touched her shoulder. "Remember," he said softly. "This is about protecting what matters. Your grandchildren. Your legacy. The truth about who their grandfather really is." Grace couldn't look away from the screen. Couldn't look away from Harold discovering the wine she'd left. Couldn't look away from Lydia reading the love letters Grace had forged. Couldn't look away from her marriage ending in real time, documented in high definition. "When?" she asked. Benjamin checked his phone. "Soon. Let them get comfortable. Let them believe they're safe." Downstairs, Harold poured wine. Lydia laughed. They toasted to something Grace couldn't hear. And upstairs, in the room where her grandchildren used to sleep, Grace would waited to destroy everything she'd ever built. The sun died slowly over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of crimson and ash. Grace watched from the upstairs window as darkness swallowed the cliffs, the ocean, the last remnants of the day she'd spent preparing her husband's reckoning. Benjamin sat across the room with his laptop, monitoring the cameras. His face glowed blue in the screen's light, expression unreadable. He'd ordered sushi neither of them ate. Opened wine neither of them wanted. They'd been sitting in silence for 2 hours, watching Harold and Lydia move through the villa below like actors who didn't know they had an audience. "They're opening the second bottle," Benjamin said quietly. Grace didn't respond. On the screen, she could see Harold in the kitchen, her kitchen, uncorking the Cabernet she'd left. Expensive vintage. The one they'd been saving for their 50th anniversary. 5 years early. Lydia stood beside him in that white sundress, barefoot, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders. She looked younger than her photographs. More alive. Harold touched her waist and she leaned into him with a familiarity that spoke of countless other moments Grace had never witnessed. "How long should we wait?" Grace asked. Benjamin checked his watch. "Until they're settled. Comfortable. Until they feel safe enough to be themselves." Through the window, Grace could see the ocean churning against the rocks. A storm was building offshore, she could feel it in the air, taste the electricity on her tongue. The villa had weathered dozens of storms over the years. Her grandchildren loved to watch from the windows, counting seconds between lightning and thunder, shrieking with delighted fear when the crashes came close. Now Grace was the storm approaching. "Tell me something," she said, still watching the water. "How long have you known about your wife's affairs?" Benjamin's fingers paused on the keyboard. "What makes you think this isn't the first?" "The way you planned this. The cameras. The precision. This isn't shock, this is practice." In the screen's reflection, Grace saw Benjamin smile. "You're perceptive, Mrs. Wood. My wife has what she calls artistic needs. Apparently monogamy stifles creativity." His voice carried no emotion. "I've known for 5 years. Different men. Different excuses. Always the same pattern. Then why stay married? Because divorce is failure. Divorce is public. Divorce means admitting I couldn't control my own household." He closed the laptop. "I'm a defense attorney. I don't lose." Grace turned to face him. In the dim light, Benjamin Moore looked less like a wounded husband and more like something predatory. "Patient. You planned this from the beginning," she said slowly. "You've been waiting for the right moment. The right accomplice. We all use the tools we have, Mrs. Wood. Lydia gave me infidelity. Your husband gave me you. And you're giving me the perfect stage for correction." The word correction settled between them like a stone. Downstairs, laughter erupted. Harold's voice, warm and full, the way he used to laugh with Grace before laughter became another performance. "They're moving to the bedroom," Benjamin said. Grace's chest tightened. "Not yet. Mrs. Wood." "I said not yet." Her voice cut sharp. "Let them have dinner first. Let them play at normalcy. Let them believe for one more hour that they've gotten away with it." Benjamin studied her with something like respect. "You want them to feel safe. I want them to feel what I felt. Every dinner I made while Harold texted her. Every conversation where he lied to my face. Every moment I trusted him while he was planning this." Grace's hands trembled. She pressed them flat against her thighs. "One more hour of false security. Then we show them the truth." At 8:30, Harold set the table. Grace watched through the cameras as he arranged plates, lit candles, created romantic ambience in the dining room where she'd hosted countless family meals. Her mother's china. The silver from their wedding. Every piece carried memories Harold was now using as props for his affair. Lydia emerged from the bedroom wearing one of the silk robes Grace kept in the guest closet. Wine red. Of course. They sat across from each other like a couple in a restaurant advertisement. Harold poured wine. Lydia toasted to new beginnings. They ate pasta Harold had made, not well, but enthusiastically, and talked about things Grace couldn't hear but could imagine. Plans. Promises. The future they thought they were building. Grace felt Benjamin watching her watch them. "Your face is very calm," he observed. "I spent 40 years teaching children to control their emotions before acting. Anger without strategy is just noise. And you're ready to make noise?" Grace stood. Smoothed her blouse. Checked her reflection in the darkened window. She looked like herself, silver hair neat, reading glasses on a chain around her neck, the picture of dignified aging. A grandmother. A retired educator. Someone's sweet wife. "I'm ready to make them listen," she said. They descended the stairs at 9 o'clock. Grace went first, her footsteps deliberate on the wooden steps. Through the dining room doorway, she could see Harold refilling Lydia's wine glass, his back to the hallway. She stopped in the doorway. "Hello, Harold." The wine bottle slipped from his hand. Red splashed across the white tablecloth like arterial spray. Harold spun, face draining of color, mouth opening and closing without sound. Lydia gasped. Her hand flew to her throat, that universal gesture of shock Grace had seen 1,000 times in her classroom when students were caught cheating. "Grace," Harold finally managed. "What are you? How did you?" "This is my house, Harold. Did you forget?" Grace stepped into the room. "The villa you told Lydia belonged to your mother's estate. The one you claimed we hardly ever used. The sanctuary I built with my inheritance, from my mother, not yours." Behind her, Benjamin appeared in the doorway. Lydia saw him and made a sound like something dying. "Ben," she whispered. "Oh God, Ben, I can explain." "Don't." Benjamin's voice was surgical. "We've heard enough explanations. We've been listening for hours." Harold's eyes darted between them. "Listening? What do you mean listening?" Benjamin pulled out his phone, pressed play. The villa filled with sound, Harold's voice saying, "Grace doesn't understand me anymore," Lydia's laughter, the intimate murmurs of betrayal documented in perfect clarity. "Stop," Lydia said. "Please stop." Benjamin didn't stop. The recording continued, every word a nail in a coffin they'd built themselves. Harold looked at Grace. Really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in years. "How long have you known? Does it matter?" Grace moved to the fireplace. Her grandchildren's drawings still decorated the mantel, Emma's mermaids, Tyler's ships, Michael's clumsy hearts. "You've brought her into the home meant for our grandchildren. The place where Emma said she wanted to live forever. You've turned our family's sanctuary into your adultery suite." "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like, Harold?" Grace's voice remained eerily calm. Explain it to me. Make me understand how 45 years of marriage became worth less than watercolor landscapes and wine-red lace. Lydia stood suddenly. You don't understand. It wasn't about love. Enough. Benjamin's command cracked through the room. Lydia sat back down as if pulled by invisible strings. Something about his control over her made Grace's skin crawl. The way Lydia obeyed instantly. The fear in her eyes when she looked at her husband. Grace, please, Harold tried again. He moved toward her but stopped when she stepped back. I never meant to hurt you. I felt invisible. Like I'd become a prop in your life. The grandfather, the retiree, the man who'd already lived his best years. So you decided to steal mine? Grace's composure finally cracked. I gave you 45 years, Harold. I gave you children who worship you. Grandchildren who think you hung the moon. A legacy most men would kill for. And you threw it away because you felt invisible? You were always busy, Harold said desperately. The grandchildren, your garden club, Sarah's drama with her divorce, Michael's business problems. When was the last time you looked at me and really saw me? Grace stared at this man, her husband, father of her children, the person she'd built an entire life around, and felt nothing but contempt. I saw you every morning when I made your coffee. I saw you every evening when I asked about your day. I saw you every time I chose you over everything else. She walked to the fireplace, pulled down Emma's mermaid drawing. But you're right. I didn't see this. I didn't see that the man who taught our grandson about integrity had none. That the grandfather who read bedtime stories about heroes was too cowardly to honor his own vows. She crumpled the drawing in her fist. Grace, no, Harold reached for her. Don't touch me. Her voice dropped to something cold and final. You lost that right when you touched her. Lydia was crying now. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. This wasn't supposed to happen. It was just what? Benjamin asked softly. Dangerously. Just a mistake. Just a moment. Just one of your many artistic explorations. Lydia's tears stopped. She looked at her husband with something like terror. Grace moved to the fireplace, struck a match. The kindling caught immediately. She'd prepared it hours ago, during the long afternoon of waiting. Flames began to climb, filling the room with crackling warmth that had once meant family, comfort, home. Now it meant something else entirely. This house was built on devotion, Grace said, watching the fire grow. I brought my children here and taught them about loyalty, about honoring your commitments, about the sacred trust between people who vow to build life together. She turned to face Harold and Lydia, backlit by flames. Now it will burn on truth. What do you mean, burn? Harold's voice climbed toward panic. Grace, what are you? The lights went out. Benjamin had cut the power. Only the fireplace illuminated the room now, casting violent shadows across the walls where family photographs watched like witnesses to an execution. What I mean, Grace said into the darkness, is that you're going to understand exactly what you destroyed. Every memory. Every promise. Every moment of trust you set on fire when you brought her here. Thunder rolled across the ocean. The storm had arrived. And inside the villa, where 3 generations had gathered, where children had played, where Grace had built something beautiful and permanent, 2 marriages prepared to burn. The darkness swallowed everything except the fireplace's furious glow. Grace stood silhouetted against the flames, watching Harold's face transform in the flickering light, confusion giving way to fear, fear bleeding into something like understanding. You've lost your mind, he said, backing toward the door. Grace, this isn't you. You don't do things like this. You're right. Grace's voice was steady. Surgical. The woman you knew wouldn't. But she died the moment I read Lydia's text. The moment I realized 45 years meant less to you than a weekend in wine-red lace. That's not fair. Fair? The word erupted from her like venom. You want to talk about fair? Let's talk about the anniversary you forgot because you were texting her. The grandchildren's recital you missed because you had a business dinner. The nights I waited up, worried you'd been in an accident, while you were in her bed planning this. Harold's jaw clenched. You're not innocent in this, Grace. You made me invisible. You turned our marriage into a museum of what we used to be, perfectly preserved and completely dead. So you decided to burn it down? I decided to feel alive again. Harold's voice cracked. Do you know what it's like to be 70 years old and realize you've become background noise in your own life? Your grandchildren barely know me as anything but the wallet. Sarah only calls when she needs something. Michael treats me like a relic. And you stopped seeing me years ago. Because you stopped being worth seeing. Grace's composure shattered. The man I married wouldn't have done this. He had integrity. Honor. He taught our son that a man's word was his bond, that family was sacred, that love meant sacrifice. When did you become someone who preaches values he doesn't live? Thunder shook the villa's foundation. Through the windows, lightning illuminated the churning ocean, the storm now directly overhead. Benjamin stood in the corner, watching them destroy each other with clinical detachment. Lydia remained frozen at the table, mascara tracking down her face, her white dress ghostly in the firelight. You know what the worst part is? Grace continued. I would have forgiven you. If you'd come to me honestly, told me you were struggling, said our marriage needed help, I would have fought for us. But you chose lies. You chose her. You chose to violate the one place that should have been sacred. This house isn't sacred, Harold spat. It's a shrine to your dead mother, to a past you can't let go of. I'm suffocating under the weight of all your memories, all your expectations. Then you should have left. Grace's scream cut through the storm. You should have been honest instead of stealing my retirement, my trust, I never loved him. Lydia's voice pierced the room like breaking glass. Everyone turned to stare at her. She stood now, trembling, eyes wide with something beyond fear. I never loved him, she repeated, looking at Grace. This whole thing, the affair, the messages, the villa weekend, it was never about romance. Harold's face went white. Lydia, what are you? It was about your money. Lydia's words tumbled out frantically. Your assets. The villa. Benjamin made me do it. He planned everything. The art gallery where I accidentally met Harold. The sob story about my struggling marriage. The way I played the neglected artist who made him feel important. It was all scripted. Grace felt the floor shift beneath her. What? Tell her, Ben. Lydia turned to her husband with desperate eyes. Tell her how you researched Harold for months. How you found out about his retirement accounts, his investment portfolio. How you discovered this villa was in Grace's name and could be contested in a messy divorce. Benjamin's expression didn't change. You're hysterical, Lydia. The stress. Don't you dare. Lydia's scream was primal. I'm done being your puppet. I did everything you asked, seduced him, sent the texts from my phone, played the mistress, because you said it would get us out of debt. You said Harold's guilt would make him settle quietly, pay us to keep quiet about the affair. Grace's mind reeled. You targeted us? Benjamin targets everyone. Lydia laughed bitterly. That's what he does. Finds wealthy older men with beautiful things and convinces them they deserve one more adventure. Then bleeds them dry when the adventure goes public. She's lying, Benjamin said calmly. But his hand had moved to his pocket. Harold lunged. He crossed the room faster than Grace thought possible for a 70-year-old man, rage propelling him toward Benjamin with murderous intent. You son of a bitch. You used her to. Benjamin's fist caught Harold in the jaw. The older man stumbled backward, crashed into the dining table. Wine glasses shattered. The candles Grace had so carefully arranged tumbled onto the tablecloth. Flames erupted across the white fabric. Harold! Grace screamed. He scrambled away from the table, but the fire was already spreading. The curtains caught. The wine-soaked fabric became fuel. Within seconds, the entire dining area was ablaze. Get out! Lydia shrieked, running for the door. Benjamin caught her arm. We're not done. Let her go. Grace grabbed a vase, threw it at Benjamin's head. He ducked, and it exploded against the wall, but his grip on Lydia loosened. Lydia tore free and ran. The fire climbed the walls like it had been waiting for permission. Grace's mother's china exploded in the heat. The photographs on the mantel curled and blackened. Emma's mermaid drawing ignited, becoming ash in seconds. 45 years of memories burning in real time. Grace, we have to leave. Harold grabbed her hand. She yanked away. Don't touch me. Don't you ever. The ceiling groaned. Beams began to crack overhead, stress fractures spreading like spider webs across the villa's bones. Benjamin was backing toward the door, phone in hand, filming. This is perfect, he muttered. Better than I planned. The grieving widow, the destroyed home, the insurance claim. You're insane, Harold breathed. I'm practical. Benjamin smiled through the smoke. Your wife brought us here. She planned this confrontation. And when this villa burns down with all of you inside, I'll be the only survivor. The devastated husband who tried to stop his mentally unstable wife from committing murder-suicide. Grace's blood turned to ice. You planned this from the beginning. I plan everything, Mrs. Wood. Did you really think I'd let you humiliate my wife publicly? Destroy my reputation? You wanted revenge, and I gave you the perfect stage. Now you'll take the blame for all of it. He turned toward the door. Harold threw himself at Benjamin's legs, tackling him to the floor. They grappled in the smoke, two older men fighting with desperate, ungainly violence. Benjamin's phone skittered across the burning floor. Grace, run! Harold shouted. The roof screamed. More beams cracked. The fire had reached the second floor now. Grace could hear windows shattering upstairs, could see flames licking through the ceiling. The guest room where her grandchildren slept. The closet where she kept their toys. The bathroom where she'd given Emma her first bubble bath. All of it burning. Benjamin's elbow connected with Harold's temple. The older man crumpled. Benjamin scrambled to his feet, searched frantically for his phone, but the smoke was too thick. Damn you, he screamed at no one. At everyone. Then the front entrance exploded inward. Lydia stood in the doorway, rain-soaked and wild-eyed. Behind her, Grace could see red and blue lights. Hear sirens approaching. I called them, Lydia sobbed. I told them everything. About the plan. About what you made me do. About all of it. Benjamin's face transformed into something inhuman. You stupid. The roof gave way. Grace felt hands grab her, Harold's hands, pulling her backward toward the deck doors. They crashed through together, tumbling onto rain-slicked wood as the villa's interior collapsed into itself. The fire roared like a living thing, consuming everything Grace had built. Every memory. Every photograph. Every piece of family history burning in a pyre of betrayal and manipulation. She crawled to the deck's edge, coughing, and watched her sanctuary die. Through the smoke, she saw Benjamin stumble out the front door, arms raised as police officers surrounded him. Saw Lydia collapse to her knees in the gravel driveway, sobbing. Saw firefighters rushing toward the inferno that had been her family's legacy. Harold lay beside her on the deck, bleeding from a cut above his eye, breathing in ragged gasps. Grace, he whispered. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. She looked at him, this man she'd loved for 45 years, this stranger who'd brought destruction into her home, this fool who'd been as much a pawn as she was. Sorry doesn't rebuild it, she said. The villa's roof collapsed completely. Sparks shot into the storm-dark sky, mixing with rain, becoming steam and ash. The grandfather clock, his mother's wedding gift, crashed through the floor. The china cabinet exploded. The deck where Emma had played began to splinter under the heat. Grace stood on shaking legs, moved to the deck's railing. Below, waves crashed against the cliffs. Behind her, everything she'd built for 3 generations burned. Grace. Harold's voice was desperate. Grace, please. She didn't turn back. Firefighters were shouting. Police radios crackled. Lydia was screaming something about Benjamin's real plan, about other victims, about years of calculated destruction. And through it all, the villa burned. Grace thought about Emma asking if she'd have a marriage like her grandparents. Thought about Tyler applying to colleges under the Wood family name. Thought about the legacy she'd spent 45 years protecting, now reduced to smoke and ash and police evidence. Mrs. Wood. A firefighter appeared beside her. Ma'am, we need to get you away from the structure. It's not safe. Safe. The word almost made her laugh. She let them lead her down to the driveway, where ambulances waited with open doors. Harold was already being treated, an oxygen mask over his face, a paramedic examining his injuries. Benjamin sat in a police car, handcuffed, face illuminated by dashboard lights. Even now, even caught, he looked calm. Calculating his next move. Lydia wrapped herself in a blanket an officer had provided, giving a statement between sobs. And Grace stood in the rain, watching her villa burn, and felt something inside her burn with it. Not love. Not hate. Not even the desire for revenge. Just ash. Everything reduced to ash. A police officer approached with questions. Grace answered mechanically. Yes, she was the owner. Yes, there had been a confrontation. Yes, Benjamin Moore had planned it all. The words felt distant. Meaningless. Behind her, the villa's walls began to collapse. The deck where her family had gathered for 40 years groaned and fell away, tumbling into the ocean below. I'm sorry, Harold said from the ambulance, mask removed. Grace, please, I'm so. Stop. Her voice was quiet. Final. Just stop. The paramedics wanted to examine her. She refused. The police wanted a full statement. She told them tomorrow. Everyone wanted something from her, explanations, cooperation, forgiveness. Grace had nothing left to give. She walked to her car, hands shaking too badly to find her keys. A police officer had to help her unlock it. As she drove away, she looked in the rearview mirror one last time. The villa was almost gone now. Just flames and framework and the ghosts of everything that should have been. Harold stood in the driveway, watching her leave. Grace didn't stop. Didn't turn back. Didn't cry. She just drove into the storm, leaving behind the ashes of 45 years, the ruins of a legacy, and the man who'd burned it all down because he felt invisible. By the time she reached home, their home, the house they'd raised children in, the rain had stopped. Grace sat in the driveway for 20 minutes, staring at the dark windows, unable to make herself go inside. Her phone buzzed. Sarah calling. Then Michael. Then Sarah again. She turned off her phone. Tomorrow, she would tell her children what their father had done. What she had done. What they'd both destroyed in the name of pride and revenge and desperate, terrible attempts to feel something other than old. Tomorrow, she would begin the impossible work of explaining to her grandchildren why their inheritance had burned. Why Grandpa and Grandma weren't talking. Why the villa where Emma wanted to live forever was now a crime scene. But tonight, Grace would sat alone in her car and finally let herself feel the weight of it all. The fire had taken her villa. But it was her choices, her rage, her need for vengeance, her willingness to partner with a monster in designer clothing, that had burned everything else. Inside the dark house, family photographs lined the walls. Grace couldn't make herself look at them. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The police found the bodies at dawn. Two shapes intertwined in what had been the master bedroom, Harold and Lydia, caught by collapsing beams as they tried to reach the upstairs window. The fire investigator said they likely died from smoke inhalation before the flames reached them. A mercy, he called it. Grace sat in the precinct's interview room and felt nothing. Mrs. Wood, can you walk us through the evening one more time? Detective Chen was young, methodical, her notepad covered in neat shorthand. Grace repeated the story she'd told twice already. The surprise visit to the villa. The confrontation with Harold and his mistress. Benjamin Moore's unexpected arrival. The argument that escalated. The candles that fell. The chaos as everyone tried to escape. And you didn't see Mr. Wood or Ms. Moore go upstairs? The smoke was so thick. I could barely see anything. Benjamin and I got out through the deck. I assumed. Grace's voice cracked perfectly. I assumed Harold was right behind me. It wasn't entirely a lie. She had assumed. Had hoped, in some small part of herself that wasn't consumed by rage, that he would survive. But she'd driven away anyway. Detective Chen studied her with tired eyes. Mr. Moore tells a different story. He claims you orchestrated the entire confrontation. That you wanted revenge. Mr. Moore is a liar who manipulated his own wife into seducing my husband. Grace met the detective's gaze steadily. He's already confessed to extortion and conspiracy. Why would you believe anything he says? Because his wife confirmed parts of his story before she died. The words hit Grace like a physical blow. Before she died. Lydia, sobbing in the rain, trying to save them all. Dead because Grace had wanted one perfect moment of vengeance. Then she also confirmed that he planned everything, Grace said quietly. That he targeted my family. That this was never about love, it was about money and manipulation. Detective Chen made a note. The fire investigator ruled it accidental. Candles on wine-soaked fabric. The storm preventing firefighters from reaching the villa quickly enough. She closed her notebook. But accidents have context, Mrs. Wood. And this context is complicated. My husband had an affair. I confronted him. The confrontation went wrong. Grace's voice was stone. What's complicated about that? Nothing, apparently. After 4 hours of questioning, they let her go. Grace walked out of the police station into weak morning sunlight. Her daughter Sarah stood by the car, eyes red and swollen. Mom. Sarah's voice broke. Oh God, Mom. Grace let herself be embraced. Let Sarah cry into her shoulder. Let her daughter believe this was grief and shock rather than the careful preservation of the story Grace needed to survive. How could this happen? Sarah sobbed. How could Dad do this to us? To you? Grace stroked her daughter's hair, the way she had when Sarah was small and the world hurt her. Some stories don't need saving, sweetheart. Some things are too broken to fix. But he was our father. Your husband. 45 years. Don't. Grace pulled back, held Sarah's face in her hands. Don't make him better in death than he was in life. Your father made choices. So did I. Now we live with the consequences. Sarah's eyes searched her mother's face. What does that mean? What consequences? Grace thought about Harold's voice calling her name as the villa burned. Thought about turning away. Thought about the choice she'd made in that moment, to save herself and let him face the fire he'd helped create. It means we move forward, Grace said. It means we protect the grandchildren from knowing more than they need to know. It means we bury him with dignity he didn't earn and we rebuild what we can. The villa is gone. All of it. Grace's voice hardened. And maybe that's better. Maybe we needed to burn down the pretty lie and see what was really underneath. Sarah flinched. You sound so angry. I am angry. I'm furious. But I'm also tired, Sarah. So tired of pretending, of protecting everyone's feelings, of being the one who holds everything together while everyone else falls apart. Grace climbed into the passenger seat. "Take me home. I need to sleep." Sarah drove in silence. When they reached the house, the real house, not the villa, never the villa again, Michael's car was already in the driveway. Grace's son stood on the porch, suit rumpled, face aged a decade overnight. "Mom." She let him hug her. Let both her children stand on either side, trying to hold up a woman who felt like she was crumbling from the inside out. "The police said it was an accident," Michael said. "But Benjamin Moore is claiming. Benjamin Moore is a criminal who destroyed his own wife for money." Grace's voice cut sharp. "Don't listen to anything he says." "But Mom, he has lawyers. Good ones. They're saying he was trying to stop you. That you were unstable, dangerous. Let them say it." Grace walked into her house, into the foyer where family photos lined the walls. Harold smiling at their wedding. Harold holding baby Sarah. Harold teaching Michael to ride a bike. Harold the devoted husband, father, grandfather. Harold the liar. She took the wedding photo off the wall, opened the frames back, removed the picture. Methodically, she began tearing it into small pieces. "Mom, what are you doing?" Sarah's voice climbed toward panic. "What I should have done years ago." Grace moved to the next photo. Tore it. Then the next. "Your father doesn't get to smile down from these walls anymore. He doesn't get to pretend he was something he wasn't. Stop." Michael grabbed her hands. "Mom, please, you're not thinking clearly. You're in shock." "I'm thinking clearly for the first time in 45 years. Grace pulled away. "Your father was having an affair. He brought his mistress to our family villa. He planned to divorce me and take what he could. These are facts. The fire was tragic, but it doesn't change what he did." Her children stared at her like she'd become a stranger. Maybe she had. 3 days later, Benjamin Moore called from his hospital bed. Grace almost didn't answer. But curiosity, dark, dangerous curiosity, made her press the green button. "Mrs. Wood." His voice was rough from smoke damage. "How gracious of you to take my call. What do you want?" "To congratulate you. You played the grieving widow beautifully. Even I almost believed it." Grace's hand tightened on the phone. "I am grieving. My husband died." "Your husband died because you wanted him to." Benjamin laughed, then coughed. "Don't pretend otherwise. You had every chance to save him. You chose revenge instead. I chose to survive. There's a difference." "Is there?" Papers rustled in the background. "You think you've won? You think because Lydia's dead and I'm facing charges that this is over? It is over. You admitted to conspiracy and extortion. Your career is finished. My career, perhaps. But you never knew the whole game, Mrs. Wood." His voice dropped to something poisonous. "I have insurance. Evidence you don't know about. And when I'm ready, when the timing is perfect, I'll show the world exactly who Grace Wood really is." The line went dead. Grace stood in her kitchen, phone trembling in her hand, and felt ice spread through her chest. What evidence? What hadn't she accounted for? The answer came a week later. The envelope arrived by courier. No return address. Inside, a flash drive and a single typed note. "Thought you should have this before I do. LM. Lydia Moore." Grace's hands shook as she plugged the drive into her laptop. The first file was video, Benjamin's hidden camera in the villa, positioned to capture everything. But instead of showing Grace as the architect of destruction, it showed Benjamin. Benjamin coaching Lydia on what to say. Benjamin setting up the cameras. Benjamin explaining how to seduce Harold, where to touch him, what vulnerabilities to exploit. "Make him feel important," Benjamin's voice instructed. "Older men are easy, just make them feel like they matter again." Lydia crying, I can't do this anymore, Ben. It feels wrong. Benjamin's hand gripping her throat. You'll do exactly what I tell you. Unless you want everyone to know about the embezzlement. About where that gallery money really came from. The next file was audio, Benjamin on the phone with someone else. A man's voice Grace didn't recognize. Wood's not the first, Benjamin said. There were 3 before him. Same pattern. Find a wealthy older man, use Lydia to seduce him, threaten to expose the affair unless they pay. Clean, simple, profitable. What about the wives? Collateral damage. Who cares? They were stupid enough to trust their husbands. The files continued. Hours of evidence. Benjamin admitting to fraud, blackmail, extortion. Benjamin explaining how he chose victims, men with assets, weak marriages, inflated egos. Benjamin laughing about how easy it was. The final file was Lydia's voice, recorded the night of the fire. If you're seeing this, I'm probably dead. Benjamin has too much control. I tried to leave so many times, but he knows things that could destroy me. Mrs. Wood, I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. Harold was kind to me. You didn't deserve this. None of the wives did. Benjamin is a monster. I was just too afraid to stop him. Grace sat in the silence after the recording ended. Lydia had sent this to her. Somehow, in the chaos before the fire, Lydia had compiled evidence and arranged for it to reach Grace. A final act of redemption. Or revenge against the man who'd controlled her life. Grace made 3 copies. One went to Detective Chen with a detailed cover letter. One went to the State Bar Association. One went to every major news outlet in California. Within 48 hours, Benjamin Moore's world exploded. The police reopened investigations into 3 other cases, older men who died in accidents after being blackmailed. Families who'd paid settlements to keep affairs quiet. A trail of destruction that stretched back 15 years. Benjamin's law firm issued a statement severing all ties. His former partner spoke to reporters about irregularities they'd always suspected. Clients filed for mistrials based on his fraudulent character. The man who'd orchestrated everything, who'd thought himself untouchable, became radioactive. And Grace watched it all from her living room with cold satisfaction. 2 weeks after the fire, Grace drove to Sarah's house. Her daughter opened the door with red eyes. Mom. I didn't expect you. I thought I'd spend time with the grandchildren. Grace stepped inside. If that's all right. Sarah hesitated. They'd been asking questions. About Grandpa. About the fire. I don't know what to tell them. Tell them the truth, that people make mistakes. That sometimes those mistakes have consequences. That we love them anyway. Tyler appeared in the hallway, then Emma, then little Michael. They looked at Grace with uncertain faces. Grandma. Michael ran forward, buried his face in her skirt. You smell like smoke. Grace knelt, pulled him close. Over his head, she saw her daughter watching with tears streaming down her face. Why do you smell like smoke, Grandma? Michael asked. Grace thought about the villa burning. About Harold's voice. About the choice she'd made. About the evidence she'd sent into the world like wildfire. Because I lit a fire that needed to burn, she said softly. Sometimes that's what you have to do. Did it hurt? Yes, sweetheart. It hurt very much. Michael hugged her tighter. I'm sorry it hurt. Grace closed her eyes, breathed in the smell of her grandson's shampoo, and felt something crack inside her chest. Not guilt, exactly. But not peace either. Just the acknowledgement that she destroyed everything, the villa, her marriage, her husband's life, maybe even her soul, and she'd do it again. Because some fires need to burn. That night, Grace drove to the cliffs. She parked where the villa had stood and walked to the edge. Below, waves crashed against rocks. The foundation remained, blackened, skeletal, a monument to everything that had been. The police tape was gone. The investigation officially closed. Accidental fire. Tragic deaths. Case solved. Grace stood where her deck had been and watched ashes scatter across the water. Ashes of her marriage. Ashes of her villa. Ashes of the woman she'd been before she understood what betrayal tasted like. The wind carried them out to sea, mixing with foam and salt until they disappeared entirely. Grace thought about Harold teaching Tyler to fish. About Emma asking for a marriage like her grandparents. About the legacy she'd spent 45 years building, now reduced to ash and police reports and news articles about a criminal named Benjamin Moore. She thought about Lydia, who'd tried to warn her at the end. About the choice to turn back or drive away. About whether she could have saved them. Whether she'd wanted to. Grace stood on the cliffs until the sun set, painting the ocean in shades of crimson and ash, and finally admitted the truth to herself. She'd wanted Harold to burn. And when he called her name through the flames, she'd let him. Not because she was a monster. But because sometimes love turns to ash, and all you can do is watch it scatter into the wind and disappear. Grace would drove home as darkness fell. Tomorrow, she would attend Harold's funeral. Would accept condolences from people who thought they knew what happened. Would stand beside her children and grandchildren and play the role of grieving widow. But tonight, she stood alone in her empty house and felt the weight of what she'd done. The fire had taken everything. And she had struck the match. Ashes don't lie. They just scatter and disappear, leaving behind only the truth of what burned. Grace turned off the lights and went to bed. She didn't dream of Harold. She didn't dream at all.